And this is a bit of a knowledge sharing. I work as a consultant mainly with Matomo, or I do that full time for a company called Digitalist. And these are our 5 best practices for the Matomo Tag Manager, which I hope you're using to collect your data in Matomo. So first, a little bit about me. I'm, as I mentioned, I'm a Matomo consultant. So I basically been working full time with Matomo at Digitalist, and I'm also a product owner. At Digitalist, we provide a high-end SaaS service for Matomo, and we also just released a new software called Rebel Metrics that is actually a dashboard solution that we connect to Matomo. That's a second session I will hold tomorrow, so please don't miss that one. So I'm kind of a product owner for both of those services at Digitalist, but mainly and for a very long time I've been working with tag management. Started off with tag management in the Google world and the Google Tag Manager, and then since 2018 mostly full time doing Matomo. So I also contribute a little bit to the Matomo Tag Manager in Matomo. So I actually built a few changes, and I've actually built a few plugins that we are using at Digitalist. We'll see if I release some of them later on to the community, but it's still in early stages. So I do some development as well. A little bit about Digitalist and Matomo. As I said, we've been providing Matomo services actually since 2013, P-Week at the time, when we hosted P-Week. And since 2018, we have been providing a high-end SaaS service for Matomo. And that means that we basically run Matomo in a real cloud. So we're using an EU-owned infrastructure. We're not using Amazon, Google, or Microsoft. So that means that you can rely on the infrastructure we are using from a GDPR perspective. We also only allow EU citizens to access our data centers. This is also a requirement in GDPR. Our hosting is ISO certified, and it's a real cloud. It's no old school VPS solution. So this is really, really good for security. Of course, this is a second topic almost to discuss, but it's really high end. We also offer support and consultants, and we are contributors to Matomo, as I said. And last but not least, we have this full-blown dashboard solution that I will demo tomorrow, integrate with Matomo. We work with a lot of clients, mainly the public sector in Sweden. These are some of the main players in the public sector in Sweden, but we also work with organizations outside of Sweden in the Nordics, but also global players like the Human Rights Watch and the Sons Without Borders and so on. So let's get started with the real content of this presentation. So the first one I'm going to talk about that we always do when we set up a new website in Matomo or when we start to do some new tracking. So I'm calling this section data cleaning, and I will talk about what I mean by that. So there are some problems, common problems, usually when I get into a Matomo site that we did not set up and we start to look into the data collected. We always almost find some issues with the data collected, usually related to that the page view data is a bit corrupted. There might also be personal data collected, and this might affect, particularly the bad page view data, might actually affect your goals and your funnels and stuff like that. So the basic example is that if I have a page and your CMS allows that page to be called with different type of URLs, this will actually lead to 3 different rows in your page view report. So that means that when you're looking at the page view number for my page on the top row, that will not include the other 2 rows. So if that problem is common, you might have a really hard time to get correct reporting, actually. Another issue might be that you're allowing URL parameters into Matomo. This might be something you want to do in some cases, but in most cases, this might do the same thing for you as the previous example. You get duplicate rows, and it will be really hard to actually get proper reporting for those pages where you have a lot of URLs. The third example is more related to personal data. Sometimes people build applications where they actually send usernames in URLs or URL parameters. And this would, of course, violate GDPR, since you're probably not meaning to store information about the user's name into Matomo. So in this case, I'm usually referring to that Matomo is just a stupid tool. It will take any data you send to it. So you're actually, as a developer or a web analyst, quite responsible for what kind of data you send into Matomo. So the solution we always apply to all the sites that we set up in Matomo is that in the page view tag in the tag manager, we always use custom variables. And in this case, we're using it for the URL. So the URL is actually not directly taken from the browser. We're using a small JavaScript to improve it. So the browser, the URL might look as on the left side. We're using my name because I'm visiting my profile on the page. Then we have the JavaScript that I'm talking about in the tag manager. And after the JavaScript manipulated this string and sent it to Matomo, we anonymized it and just send username. So we don't know what user actually did that page view. Which can also be great because normally you're not interested in reports about how many times Tomas actually visited his profile. You want to know how many times any user visited that page. So it's usually better for reporting as well. So the solution here is that we create this, and this is really a simple version of it. We're creating this JavaScript variable in Matomo. I will show you better examples, but basically we're reading here the path, we're forcing it to be lowercase, and we're removing every trailing slash. This will not, of course, solve the issue with the username previously, but it's a start to at least remove the most common problems we see in Tag Manager or in the data for the page views. The full example here, I actually have a site where I share this, and I will share that with you later on, because we actually use the same JavaScript every time, and we do some modifications of it. So, and the modification is that we're basically removing all URL parameters, but we're allowing you to define some URL variables that will be let through to Matomo. So in this case, usually your site has searching, and you probably have want Matomo to read those URL parameters. So that means that if your URL contains question mark s equals and then the search string, this will not be blocked, etc., etc. So you basically in the JavaScript just define this. And then, of course, if you're using Google Ads, you want those to be let through. By default, we're always letting through query parameters from campaigns, both for Matomo and the Google version. So I can show you the actual, let's see if I do this, you should probably see the actual repository of that I'm using. So I can just zoom down. You will get the URL to this repository later on. But basically we are forcing lowercase, we're handling those query parameters, and we're doing some checks to make sure that everything is working correctly. So yeah, I encourage you to look it up and of course test it on your site, because you should never just copy paste JavaScripts, but it's a great tool, and it will enhance the data you collect. All right, so that was the first chapter. Please type questions in the chat if you have them. Let's see. Okay, so I already have a question. Not directly linked to Matomo Tango, but we already studied possibility of renaming existing value to Matomo. Thanks, Matomo. Backfill. Okay. Not sure if I fully follow you there, Ronan, but of course you can. Yeah, you're probably mentioning that if we end up having problems, that we notice that we had problems, you can definitely modify the raw data and reprocess Matomo. But in this case, it's so much better to to fix things beforehand, I would say. Okay, so the second topic here is that I really encourage users to think about custom dimensions early. So first of all, why? Well, because dimension can really help you to do segmentation of your data that is really custom to your application. And of course, that will lead to better insights and better uh, better reporting in the end, or insights is probably what you're looking for. So first of all, what are dimensions? Well, the simple definition is that dimensions are descriptions of your numbers. So for instance, if you're looking at the page view report, the URL describes the metric, and you can also have a title, a page title that will describe the metric. So those are dimensions. So and custom dimensions are these kind of labels that you add your own by yourself, and you probably understand better what I mean when we're looking at the next page. So there are two types of dimensions in Matomo that you can um, that you can use. And the first one is action dimensions. And action dimensions are related to page views or events. So the simple example that I'm showing you right now is that maybe we want to catch some metadata from a particular page. So the image credit from an image, the author of the article, or the tag of the that the page belongs to. Those are really simple ones. The other option you have is to add visit dimension, and those are connected to the visit of the browser, basically. So that could be something that you read out from your CMS, whether the user is logged in. One example I did was that I read from the browser what setting the user had in their they could configure basically the font size. So they had an option to select small, medium, or large text in the application, and we could send that to Matomo and then make filtering. So I just want to look at users that have a small font size, and then you can do that segmentation based on the dimension we sent in. The other one could be that you have different groups for your users. Maybe you have 3 customer types that people logged in, and you want to send that to Matomo to better filter out what type of group of user you're looking at. So those are the examples. So what we need to remember: action dimensions are connected to page views and or events, and visit dimensions are connected to visitors. All right. So you already think about custom in order to mention who is a qualified wizard who is not based on their behavior, so the segmentation can be done easier. I think that's a different thing. Maybe you're thinking about, Ronan. You could definitely build some logic to create personas, but I think in this case, I'm doing more simple stuff, reading direct data. But you can definitely build logic, or can you develop maybe the question a little bit? Okay, cool. So this is more about the basics, but what I really want to emphasize here is that think about this early, because this can really help you to get great great insights from your site. So yeah, so how do you do it? Well, the solution is that you first of all discuss what can we track, or what kind of metadata can we add to the tracking. So For instance, if your site has a lot of blog posts, it might be really nice to add the tags or the authors of the pages for the blog posts so that we can know what topics are most popular on the site, for instance. Secondly, just set it up in Matomo. We will, of course, demo this a little bit soon. And third, set up a variable in Matomo Tag Manager that will read that metadata from the page. You of course, have to have it available in the browser before you send it to Matomo. And then finally, we add that variable to the Matomo configuration variable. Again, I will demo this soon. So yeah, and then you can enjoy the results, of course. So what it can look like, or when we start with going into the administration interface and add that dimension. So in this case, I've added 2 action dimensions in my Matomo installation. I call them author and tags, just as the example I told you before, because that's probably something you have on a blog site. The next step would be, so this is super simple. It's just clicking create, type author, and then just save, and then you'll have them. The next thing you want to do is to set up a variable in Matomo that reads that data. So you do that in the tag manager, and usually I'm using a custom JavaScript, or you can sometimes use the simpler ones, but this will be a more example one. So this one is actually checking if do we have an author tag on the page, then return the inner text of that tag, otherwise return null or empty string. Straightforward. And of course, the same thing for the tags. The tags can be a bit more tricky because tags, there can be multiple on a page, and that's a really different topic. But so let's keep it simple. Let's talk about the author. The last step would be to go into the Matomo configuration variable. That's also in the tag manager, and that's the default. And there you will have the custom dimensions. So here you will have to enter the ID. The ID came from the list where we created it. So in this list, you can see that the author has ID number 1. This is the ID we want to add in the variable, and then we want to map it to the variable we created called author. That's actually how simple it is. You just publish it and save it, and then voila, in your interface, you will have a new tab under behavior called author, and you will see something like this. Usually, this one actually shows you all the actions. So usually you need to create a custom report to do proper page view reporting, but the data is there, it's great, and I can promise you it's quite fun to look at things like that. So any questions? Yeah, I'm seeing Ronan is typing again. That's great. Okay, so the question is, the configuration you just showed us, is it something that you're deploying by automation to your clients, for example, by importing a container or a plugin, or is it something you perform manually? Yeah, we would do this manually because it's really simple. And when it comes to, I think the custom part, I will show you that, is usually this, like digging out the data from the site, and that will be hard to automate. It's really unique to every site, and you might have to set up rules because depending on the structure of the CMS, I mean, this is the hard part, but most commonly not hard. Right, let's see, we have another question, I think. Udo Troutman. Waiting for that. Another use case that, I mean, in this case, you have the action report. So you're basically looking at the actions based on the author. If you're using the visit filtering, what you do instead, and I'll show you that. Instead of that, you probably want to do a segment based on that. So if you create custom dimension, they will actually show up. So I can, in this case, I'm looking at author, but you will find actually also the visit dimension here. So you can like if you have a customer group called premium clients, you can create a segment, call it premium clients, just read the data from that and say that, all right, so if the custom segment is premium, we can look into only those users. So it's really, really powerful if you want to do something like that. Okay, let's see if we had more questions. Where were the chat? I just need to come to the right place. One question to variables is if a variable has no value, what happens with the tracking of the custom dimension? Well, you'll actually have, let's see if I can show you that. Hang on. Just need to open the correct place in my installation. We'll say something like empty or no value. Or in this case, actually, I I need to check my code, but where is it? Just need to open up the correct presentation. So in this case, I'm actually having some kind of a JavaScript error, but you will get a row that is usually empty. I don't remember the default value. Maybe we can check it here. No. That will be null or empty. So it basically will look like that. I hope it explained the question. So important, of course, when you do these things are that you need to validate your JavaScript. The example default. Yeah, you can have a default value, definitely. You should do that in your variable, but usually a null string will give you that, and will show up in the report as well. Okay, let's jump to the next section, which is consent management. And of course, this is super important if you're working within the European Union. Why? Well, because you don't want to be a lawbreaker, right? And you don't want your clients to become lawbreakers, because GDPR is actually a law. It's not an opinion. It's not something we can really decide whether we want to follow it or not. So when it comes to web analytics, we need to understand that users has to be able to do, they have a lot of rights basically. And one of the things that is really important to understand is the definition of profiling when it comes to consent. So what I also think you need to understand is that we often talk about personal data as something that where you can identify an individual, but the GDPR data protection regulation actually goes beyond that, because they talk about indirect and direct data, or objective and subjective information. So it's actually not even necessary that the information itself make it possible to identify an individual. So this means that if you're just creating a unique ID, which is what Matomo does when they're setting a cookie, because they're setting that unique ID to be able to do profiling, and we'll come to see what profiling is. So in the next step, I will show you that. So the first time I visit a website, we probably set a cookie or another identifier. I'll talk about that. And that identifier is probably stored in your browser, and that means that we are creating a profile. So the next time this user comes to the website, we can read the value from that cookie, that unique ID that we created. And then we can basically start to add data to that profile in our system. So in Matomo, we usually see this, that users have more than one visit. We can look at the visitor profile, and this means that we have been doing profiling on this user. And the profiling parts require consent in GDPR. So this is why we really, really need to take care of this. And what most people forget, the discussion is often that it's often about the cookie, but it's actually not about the cookie. It's about the profiling, and the profiling can be achieved with a lot of other technologies than cookies. So you can, what Matomo actually does during a session. So during a visit, Matomo actually do this technique called fingerprinting. So when you're disabling cookies in Matomo, we can still know that this is the same browser actually that sends data to Matomo. And fingerprinting is a server technology. So we're looking at tons of dimension and create this unique profile combined from the IP address, the browser size, etc., etc. So this is a known technique, and this is also what Google are using to identify individuals even without cookies. So this is actually the technology we are using within Matomo to be able to run without cookies. The important thing that happens in Matomo is that this fingerprint, that it's called, will be forgotten after the visit has ended. So next time you come there, Matomo will not detect that fingerprint and connect it to the previous visit. And this is the important key where and why Matomo can be GDPR compliant when you run it without cookies. Yeah, so technically we could use printing or actually store things in the local storage or something like that. So the simple solution we need to do to become compliant is, of course, to run Matomo without cookies until you have a tracking consent. Second one is that we need to, as soon as we have a consent, or at least this is the best practice we're usually using, when you have that consent, then we allow Matomo to set its cookies as well, because we want that, right? Because that will give us better analytics features, and I will tell you a little bit about what you will lack if you're not setting cookies. And the last step is, of course, that we want to remove the consent if or remove Matomo's cookies if the tracking consent is removed. So what's the downside of this? Well, if we're running Matomo without cookies, of course, the returning visitor number is not really reliable anymore. The other thing we need to understand is that attribution will be limited. Attribution is the part where we're looking at an individual, or not an individual, hopefully, but on a visitor profile. And on that visitor profile, you can see actually from what channel did this user come from at their first visit. That type of information will of course be limited and not so reliable. There are some more details about that, and you can actually read more at matomo.org. There is a great blog post about this, so read it and understand it. From my side and my perspective, I think this doesn't really matter. You have most of the data you need, and I usually say that when you're looking at data, you need to look at trends. You're not looking at facts. So we're still looking for trends when we're doing analytics, and trends that leads to insights that lead us to decision to change our application. All right, but hey, it's legal, right? So you're running without cookies, and it's going to be legal. So let's look at the details a little bit more in detail. So first of all, we want to force that cookie consent, or force Matomo to run without cookies before. So and then we need to set up two variables. I'm usually setting up one variable that looks at your CMP platform or cookie management platform, and then I usually I always set up a variable that looks at Matomo's consent cookie. Secondly, I create two tags, one for consent given and one for consent removed. We'll look at those soon. And then finally, two triggers that is the kind of logic. So when the consent given trigger is fired, we're firing the code for consent given. And the same for the consent removed one. And last but not least, we update our cookie policy to contain the Matomo cookies, of course. But in simple, and you can read more about things there again. So to force Matomo to run without cookies, we can just check this checkbox on the Matomo configuration variable. So that's it. If you do that, it will run without cookies until you give the consent to Matomo. Secondly, we set up two variables, and in this case, I'm going to show you the simple version where we're reading actually two cookies. So in the top, we're creating a cookie variable called mtm cookie consent. This is actually the name of the cookie Matomo sets when you gave it a consent. I'm also setting a default value, and I will explain soon why. So I'm setting it to not set. Secondly, in this case, we're having a really simple cookie set by the cookie management platform. And at the same time here, I'm setting it to not set. If the cookie does not exist, it will be not set. So what we'll do next is, so I will set up a trigger. So the first trigger will be for consent given. So I'm looking at this accepted cookies and making sure that it's not equal not set. So it has a value. Then I know we have a consent. In some cases, it might be that we're checking for it has to be to contain analytics equals true. But this is really unique for your solution, of course. Finally, we don't want to run this code all the time. So if the Matomo cookie consent is already set, we can just ignore. We don't have to run this all the time. So yeah, so this is the example. It could be that it contains statistics, for instance, and then we're executing it. We also want to create a trigger for if the consent is removed, and then we're just doing it the other way. So we're looking at if the Matomo cookie is available and accept cookies is not or equals not set. But there you have a really simple logic. And then after that, we create a tag. So this is basically a custom JavaScript. So it's a custom HTML tag. And we call the first one remember cookie consent given, and it's going to be fired by the trigger we just created. And then we have the forget consent given. It's basically the same code, but as you may, I don't know if it's visible enough, but the code is forget cookie consent given. You actually have this code in Matomo as well, and we'll send you links and so on. Yeah, that's about it. Any questions in this part before we move on to the next section? What I can mention here is that this is really the simple example. I've been using a lot of cookie management platforms, and in this example, we're using page view triggers. But what you would probably want to do is to create JavaScript triggers that fires on when someone, because in this logic, you will only check the consent on a page view. But you actually want to change it directly when someone changes the consent. So a little bit depending on what cookie management platform you have, you may want to set up event listeners so that you can fire on the consent manager's built-in JavaScript events and then fire these triggers. But that's a quite more advanced example, and I will not go into because it's really different code for different platforms. I'm just mentioning that this is actually a better way to do it. I actually built some of these tools, so I have code for cookie hub, cookie information, and I think 5 of them that can do that kind of logic. But it's way too detailed code. But you can contact me afterwards if you're interested, and I can show you some examples. All right, so no questions for this one. So next one is custom search tracking. So why? Well, of course, better search tracking might give you new insights and might give you ideas about what content your site is missing and so on. And you ever wondered why the search keyword with no result is always empty? Well, this is the reason why you're not using custom search tracking, and this is something you need to set up by yourself. And why? Well, on a website, if your website has some kind of a number saying how many search results you had on a search result page, that is a value that Matomo cannot really know what it is. You have to specifically point out that number, collect it, and send it to Matomo. And most of the times you really have to set up your own solution. So the solution here is that you start by disabling search, or you actually just change the settings a little bit. And this is a bit of a hack. I will show you that soon. We need to implement a new trigger that detects search. So maybe we're looking at a trigger where the page contains question mark, query, or search, or something like that. It's of course unique for your page. Finally, we want to disable the page view tracking for the search page and set up a custom tag for that. And then execute our JavaScript that will collect, or we will want to set up variables that collects the search count, the search keyword, and etc. And finally, we want to execute some code to send the data to Matomo. So this is what we're doing. First of all, we go into the website configuration, and you probably seen this, but where you configure a website in Matomo, you have something called search tracking enabled, and you still want to have that enabled. The only thing I want you to do is to make sure you're not using the default search parameters. I'm actually adding a parameter that is not in use and a category parameter that is not in use. So that means we will not really catch any data from the URLs. Secondly, I'm creating, as I said, a trigger, maybe a page view. URL contains question mark q equals blah blah blah. And then if your site has it dynamically adds searches. You probably want to do some history change plus some logic above. So that's the trigger, so that we know that someone searched. Finally, you want to create a JavaScript that reads the number from the page. And this is really unique to your page. You need to look into the HTML and make sure that you can read the search count div or whatever number you have there. But you need to create a variable, and of course, do your testing. Make sure that if you're not having anything, don't return anything, and so on. What we want to do next is that we maybe want to create a variable to read if we have this URL query parameter called q. We can create a variable to just read that, and we can call it search keyword. Maybe we want to have a category from the URL in the same way, so we're creating another variable containing the category, whatever name that has. And now to the magic. We're creating this custom HTML tag where we're reading the variables like this, and then the row here push track site search, search keyword, search count, and we're sending it to, in this case, I actually was skipping search keyword or search category. That would be the empty line in the middle, but if you have it, you can send it. And if you do so, Matomo will start to catch your search counts, and you will probably love it a little bit more than you already did. I will send you links to these, some code examples later on. And any questions on this part so far? No questions. Cool. Let's jump to this last section. Accessing data relative to the click element. One of my favorite ones. So a lot of times setting up tracking can be really, really frustrating. You're getting to a site that someone else has coded, and the project manager or the responsible for the sites, they want to track a lot of things, and we're probably helping them to, like, yeah, on this page we really would like to read this and that and send it in as events. But then when you start to code, you notice that it's really, really hard to get the correct data out from the site. And the really, really simple, stupid example I usually start with is this. You have the code in pink. So you have a button, click element. And when someone clicks this button, what I really want is some information that is actually not available on the button itself. So in Matomo, you usually have something called click text, but that will be something else. What I really want is to return the class name of the div above it, or much more complicated usually. So the next step, yeah, so I want to return this. The example from a website perspective can be that we have a page like this, and when someone clicks one of the newsletters or news links, we want to read the title in the section above. And this will never really be easy, especially if there are multiple sections on the site. And when you run into these problems, you usually need to run a lot or write a lot more complicated code. So I will give you just a simple code to solve this. So if someone clicks on the button and then you want to read the class name of the element above, you can create, and again, you don't need to take photos here. I will send you a link to my GitHub repository where this code is available. But you're basically using the Matomo Tag Manager data layer and check what type of event there was, and then you're reading with the data layer again. So you have this thing called the click element, and then you read the parent element. This is just simple JavaScript, maybe not so simple, and then you return the class name of that element. So this is really a simple one. If you're going to go a little bit more advanced, you can, in this case, now we're just shorting it down. So you have the click element, and then you're using the parent's parent. So we're actually taking 2 steps up in the structure. And then maybe we want to check if a button is already expanded or something like that. So you can do that in a variable and use that output in a trigger. So in this case, this is usually if you have accordions on a site and you want to know if the accordion is already open or not when someone clicks it, you can probably use a code like this to find out if the parent, whatever it is, has the area expanded attribute or something else that makes you sure that it's open or closed. Another function you can use is closest. What closest will do is that we'll just search upwards in the HTML structure. So let's say it's 10 levels above the element people actually click to. We'll find it this way. So that's really, really, really powerful. What you can start to do is just open up a website where you have Matomo, and you can, in the console, use this Matomo Tag Manager data layer get mtm click element. that will be, so if you're just right click on anything or click anywhere on the page, don't click on menus, so that takes you to another page, but just try to click, and then you type this in the console, and it will actually return the element you clicked on. This is actually the same information that you will have in the debugger, but you can really do this in the console, and you can do this on any site where Matomo is running to learn. Just play with it. So yeah, that was actually the last section. Sharing is caring. So this is really the link to my repository. I can copy that and send it into the chat as well if you want to see it. So I have a bunch of snippets where you can see different type of solutions that I've created for Matomo. So I usually paste them there and share with you. So, and there is also some documentation for it here. All right.
Okay. Thank you very much, Thomas. I'm sorry every question that I ask you were kind of a bit off topic because you know that I'm a huge fan of yours. So I already watched the previous conferences that you already held at Matomo Camp. Though I still have one question for you, which is coming on and on with my client.
Yep.
So in fact, those questions are linked with the two premium features of Matomo, which are the form analytics and the media analytics. So I have different type of clients, and some of them cannot afford to purchase premium features. So when that's the case, I need to find out a way, let's say, to offer them some, let's say, affordable solution. And one of them is, of course, to go on Simo Hava websites or other tutorial that I can find on the internet in order to automate, let's say, kind of the same thing that form analytics and media analytics. And so far, I didn't find any good solution when it comes to tracking automatically video from YouTube. And I just wanted to know if on your side you already saw some scripts that you
Actually,
can adapt and use for that.
I have some scripts for it. First of all, you need to know because if you're using the iframe version of YouTube, you will not be able to track that.
Yeah.
However, there is a URL parameter you can add. Let's see if I can find it.
Like the enable API GSP something.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, you're correct. So if you're using that, yeah, maybe you already knew it. So it's the enable API. We're correct. So if you use that, you will actually be able to listen. You can create event listeners in your console. I don't remember the code, but I've done it before. And then you can do pretty much the same thing as that's probably what Matomo is using as well. Because, you know, if you're using the iframe version of YouTube in Matomo, media analytics can't read that either unless you add that parameter. It's really blocked.
Okay.
But I can see if I can find anything. Let's chat about that later. Then I can dig into my old code libraries.
Okay. In all cases, the room will stay open even tomorrow and even some days after. So if you would like to share with the audience different findings that you have, just feel free to post them here or even on the LinkedIn Matomo Camp group. That's no big deal. You can really put it up there. Are there any questions left from the audience? Lots of thank you. So I can see.
What I can say that's don't miss my session tomorrow. I'm really thrilled about the thing we done with Apache Superset. It's I'm getting happier and happier every day when I use it.
Okay. Well, if you would like to, let's say, get it more visibility, feel free as well to use the LinkedIn group. When you post something, I guess it goes through my moderation, but I'm like kind of checking it almost every 5 seconds here, so I will approve it so that
Yeah, that's
you
good.
can get maybe a little help from the social network. But do not hesitate to do it because I mean, I have like 40 different speakers. I have my own conferences as well. I have so many stuff happening so that I can't have an eye everywhere. So I cannot
Yeah,
think of everyone. So if every communication that you can send, feel free to ask me for a little additional push and I will do it.
excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
Great.
Um,
But see you tomorrow then, I guess.
yeah, I'm just gonna pause the recording now. Oops. So, okay. So that's it. That's the end of the first day of